when Briar Schmigelski was still listed as missing. His father described him as a self-styled expert in wilderness survival. And joining us now is Sherman Kong in Winnipeg. He is the founder and director of education and training for Maple Leaf Survival. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Sherman, let's assume that these suspects have some level of basic survival skill. We're not entirely sure what the father meant by, gaining these survivalist skills. But if they have some basic skills, how sustainable would hiding out in the wilderness be if that's what they're doing right now?
Well, I think the larger question beyond their level of survival training is their mindset. So in this case, because it's not your typical search and rescue, where if, those who find themselves in harm's way know what they're doing and they stay put to make it easier for a search team to find them. In this case, it's a little bit different because they're on the run. So some of the survival tactics that they might be employing are perhaps more aligned with a military-style survival situation where they're trying to evade capture. So I would say because of the location and the terrain that they're in, as many people have already alluded to, it's very rough. It's swampy, it's boggy, it's very dense. It can make navigating very difficult. Even if you have a map and compass, just getting from A to B can be very treacherous, increasing the probability of injury if they're not potentially already injured. But the other thing, too, is just the bugs. They might not be used to that. And even for someone who's very skilled and adept to being in the bush, that's something that's very uncomfortable and can literally drive someone crazy.
Sherman, can you describe what military-style survival would look like?
So the difference between someone who is employing traditional survival tactics, where they're just trying to literally stay alive and wait for help to come. In this case, it might be a little bit different if, in fact, they're employing this type of survival tactic where you're trying not to be found. So if they, for instance, have firearms, they may not want to discharge them for fear of being located or attracting attention, which might be problematic for them if they're intending to use their firearms to hunt or protection against animals or anything else they might find to be a threat. Lighting fires, for instance, they may wish not to light fires in the evening, which again could be problematic because if they're looking to stay warm or ward off animals, lighting fires at night it will alert someone, especially from the air. It's easier to see flames at night than it is by day. So they may be employing different tactics to evade being located. That may or may not include camouflage or staying in one place or moving around with a strategy in mind. It's kind of hard to say, but the main difference is, on one hand, you're trying to be found, and in this case, it doesn't seem like they want to be found.
You mentioned mindset as well. Would fear, or would there be other sort of psychological reactions that they could be having that would be playing into their survival?
Again, in this case, it's a little bit different. Mindset is absolutely crucial. So earlier you had mentioned, they may have a certain level of survival proficiency, which is fine, but you can have all of the gear and all the equipment and supplies and all of the training, but if in a real life situation you panic and you lose the ability to think cohesively and coherently, none of that means anything. So their mindset is going to be huge. Now, again, in this situation, because it's survival plus the assumption that they're trying to evade capture, that adds a whole nother level of psychological psychology into it. So it may or may not work against them. So depending on how far they're willing to go with whatever their ultimate goal is, it might help push them towards that goal and help them remain out there longer. Or at the same time, it might not. They might be getting desperate because, again, they're not only trying to survive and stay alive, but they also have the added burden of people looking for them.
Yeah,
and not for a good reason.
Right, and as you mentioned, we don't really know what they're doing right now. If they are trying to evade capture, if they are doing that, if they are in the process of doing that right now, we're not even entirely sure. But Sherman, I wonder if you were trying to find these two suspects, how would you go about it? What would be your strategy?
My strategy would probably be the exact same as the teams that are out there looking for them. They know what they're doing. They have experience doing this. They have the proper manpower. They have the resources. So I don't believe that whatever they're doing, it would be different from my strategy.
What are some of the challenges that you think the RCMP and those people that are out looking for these two young men are facing right now? I know we talked about the challenges that the young men are facing, but I mean, I'm sure some of them are similar for the RCMP. But what are some of the biggest challenges you think that they're facing?
Well, aside from the fact that they don't really know where they are, I would say that's probably a big factor. They probably only have the last known location being their vehicle, but the area that they're in is a pretty large geographical area, and so what makes it really difficult is if they're moving, it's hard to find someone who's trying to basically not get found. Again, like I was saying with the earlier example, in a typical survival situation, you would stay put so long as it's safe to do so. But in this case, because they're trying to evade capture, and if they're moving around, it makes a search effort very difficult. Coupled with the fact they might not know exactly where to start looking, they may have a general idea. That makes it very challenging.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your context on this, Sherman.
Thank you.
Sherman Kong is in Winnipeg. He is the founder and director of education and training for Maple Leaf Survival.